Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because, well, we are about to unpack a truly massive paradigm shift. We're looking at this incredibly fascinating, super high-stakes intersection of rapidly advancing AI, the transhumanist movement, and deep metaphysical theology. You know, we constantly hear about how tech is changing what we do, but today we're looking at a much bigger question: how it might be changing what we essentially are. Okay, let's dive right into this. To navigate these high-level metaphysical concepts impartially, we're going to follow a clear roadmap. We'll hit a new secular faith, the Imago Dei crisis, the modern Tower of Babel, the concept of technological theosis, and finally, rejecting Christian transhumanism.
So, starting off with Section 1, a new secular faith. Is it really just science?
When we hear about transhumanism, the pursuit of radically upgrading the human body and mind through technology, we usually think of it as a purely scientific, atheistic pursuit, just Silicon Valley working on the ultimate meat suit upgrade, right? But that brings us to this incredibly provocative question. Is it actually a science, or is it functioning as a religion? Thinking about it this way completely reframes how we view those ultimate ambitions. Just look at this quote from the academic journal Zygon. It states point-blank that transhumanism operates as a secularist faith. It takes traditional religious concerns, things like the deeply human fear of death or the desire for perfection, and it simply swaps out the deity for a microchip. Instead of looking to the divine for salvation, it endows technoscience with that exact same ultimate religious significance. It's wild to think about.
In fact, the sources describe this movement as a religion without revelation. It has its very own eschatology, an ultimate vision for the end of the world, and its own soteriology, or path to salvation. But here's the catch. Transcendence and digital immortality aren't achieved through divine grace, moral discipline, or prayer. Nope. They are achieved through genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and the grand promise of uploading our minds to the cloud.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the Imago Dei crisis, defining the theological stakes. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how traditional theology is pushing back hard against the secular faith. So we have to define exactly what's at stake here, and that is the Imago Dei, or the image of God. Theologians assert that human dignity is intrinsic. It's defined by our relationality, our moral agency, and our dependence on a creator. It is absolutely not defined by our computational capacity, our processing speed, or our ability to just autonomously redefine our own biology. You can really see the stark contrast when we compare how both sides view the physical human body. On the left, the theological view sees a psychosomatic unity, meaning body and soul are just deeply, inextricably intertwined. The body is a relational temple, right? A permanent part of your identity destined for resurrection. But on the right, the transhumanist view treats the physical body as an obsolete biological substrate. It's viewed as just meat, basically a defective container that desperately needs to be discarded or radically upgraded by technology.
Let's move on to Section 3, the modern Tower of Babel, anthropological hubris.
This fundamental clash over human nature leads theologians to anchor their critique in an ancient metaphor, framing this technological ambition as modern blasphemy and contemporary idolatry. Just like the biblical builders of Babel, who tried to literally pierce the heavens, transhumanism is seen as an act of immense anthropological hubris. It's the pursuit of absolute autonomy. It attempts to completely erase human finitude, treating our natural limitations like bugs to be fixed rather than sacred boundaries. Ultimately, it's seeking an immanentized eschaton, which is just a fancy way of saying a man-made heaven on earth, achieved entirely through human control.
And listen, this isn't just fringe philosophy we're talking about. As we see from the American Academy of Religion, this is a major topic of really rigorous academic debate. Scholars like Dr. Don Lewis Sutherland are actively presenting papers arguing that this technological structural rebellion is a massive crisis of idolatry, completely supplanting divine sovereignty with human artifice.
Okay, Section 4, the concept of technological theosis, the Eastern Orthodox critique.
This brings us to a super fascinating layer of the debate. To grasp this, we need to define the classical Orthodox teaching of theosis, or deification. Simply put, this is the belief that human beings are ultimately meant to achieve union with God. But, and this is the absolutely critical part, this transformation requires spiritual grace and what is called kenosis. Kenosis is humility, vulnerability, and the voluntary self-emptying of the ego.
And this brilliantly illustrates the divide, because Orthodox scholars argue transhumanism is basically a secular parody of deification. On one side, transhumanism offers man-godhood, trying to become godlike through autonomous human effort, technological mastery, and endlessly extending the ego. But true theology, on the other side, seeks God-manhood, which requires submission to divine will, accepting divine grace, and really embracing our relational dependence on the Creator.
So let's walk through this matrix, because you can see how these two worldviews are attempting to answer the exact same fundamental human questions, but in entirely opposite ways. For a goal, theology seeks bodily resurrection. Transhumanism seeks digital data preservation. Theology roots human dignity in the imago Dei. Transhumanism roots it in cognitive processing power. And most tellingly, theology views suffering and death as realities that open us up to grace, while transhumanism views them purely as biological errors to be engineered away by silicon and algorithms.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this all builds. Rejecting Christian transhumanism, the paradox of the hybrid.
When people try to combine these two inherently opposed views into something called Christian transhumanism, the whole thing hits a metaphysical brick wall: soul versus software. I mean, think about it. If you believe consciousness is just computation that can be uploaded to a computer, what happens to the eternal immaterial soul? If a mind is copied to a server, which version actually possesses the soul? Traditional theology argues you simply cannot merge sacred divine breath with copyable digital data. And the sources deliver this incredibly punchy, direct quote. Either you have an immortal soul or you're sophisticated software. It's the Tower of Babel with better marketing. Boom! Traditional theologians view these ontologies as completely mutually exclusive. You just cannot mix a theology of transcendent grace with an ideology of purely human technological control. Now you might be wondering, wait, didn't biblical figures experience miracles like extreme long life or miraculous healing? Actually, scratch that. The theological argument makes a really sharp distinction here. Divine miracles, over on the left, demonstrate our absolute dependence on God's grace. They are meant to humble us. Technological power, on the right, does the exact opposite. It demonstrates purely human capability and empowers us to assert control over natural law. The means completely change the meaning. We also see this reflected strongly in the Jewish critique found in the sources. The profound concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world, cannot be achieved just by inventing better AI or gene editing our way out of our problems. It strictly requires internal, ethical, and spiritual repair first. Treating human-made algorithms as if they have the salvific power to perfect humanity is explicitly defined by these scholars as outright techno-idolatry. Which leaves us with this final, truly profound question to ponder today. As we all rush headlong into the age of AI and human enhancement, we have to ask ourselves, are our physical limitations, our vulnerabilities, and our mortalities simply biological bugs waiting to be coded out? Or are they the exact, sacred features that make us truly human, capable of love and open to grace? Think deeply about that the next time you hear a promise of a technological utopia. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.